Whenever you're naming a compound or working with a compound, it's important to know what kind of compound you're talking about. For this class, we'll cover three major categories of compounds: ionic, molecular, and acidic. So whenever you're going to name one, the first thing you want to do is determine which category it falls into. Now remember that ionic compounds are compounds that have a metal and a non-metal bonded together. The metal will always be listed first, and the non-metal will always be listed second. In an ionic bond, the metal is actually transferring one or more electrons to the non-metal. In a molecular compound, you will see two or more non-metals bonded to each other. In these, the electrons are actually shared between the different non-metal elements. And lastly, we have acidic compounds. Acidic compounds may contain a metal, they may not contain a metal, but for this class, the way that you can identify them is they will start with an H, or a hydrogen atom. So that doesn't mean that if it contains a hydrogen, it's an acid. That means if it's written with the hydrogen atom first, but for the purpose of this course, you can consider it to be an acidic compound. Acids are a lot more complicated than that, but that's as far as we'll go. Okay, so let's take a look at a list of compounds and determine whether they are ionic, molecular, or acidic. So the first question we'll ask ourselves is, does it start with an H? If we look here, we see that this does not start with an H, it starts with Ca. So that is definitely not an acidic compound. The next question is the first element listed a metal? Remember, if you look at your periodic table, the metals are anything here. Anything on this left bottom side of the table is a metal, excluding hydrogen. So we look for calcium. Here it is, definitely within that circle, so that makes it a metal. Since calcium is a metal, that means that this is ionic. Let's do the same for this one. Is the first one an H? No, so it's not acidic. Then let's see if this first letter, C, carbon, is a metal. Carbon is right here, which makes it a nonmetal. These ones in the middle of the lines I'm tracing are semi-metals, and we will avoid those for the most part in this class. These are nonmetals, and these are metals. Okay, so carbon is in the nonmetal section, which means that this is a nonmetal. Oxygen is also a nonmetal, which means that this is a molecular compound. If we look at our third one here, it starts with an H. That automatically makes it an acid, and we don't have to do any more work. If we look here, the first element listed is N for nitrogen. We can find nitrogen on our periodic table here, right next to carbon. That's firmly in the nonmetal section, so that makes this also a molecular compound. This one, HNO3, begins with an H, so that makes it an acid. And lastly, this one begins with Na. Look at our periodic table. Na is sodium right here on the metal side, which makes this one ionic. It's important to note that Ca, anytime you have a capital followed by a small letter, so you have a capital C and a small a, that is a single element. Whereas CO, since this is capital and this is capital, that's two separate elements. If you had written it like this is one element, and this one's actually a metal. So it's important to know even whether the letters are capital or small.